Today, the government of Libya announced the death of Muammar Gaddafi.
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies.
We all know who and what issue Nelson Mandela was talking about when he made this statement. Now, imagine if Nelson Mandela had been the president of South Africa when the West went into Libya and got rid of Muammar Gaddafi. Would South Africa have gotten involved? It's interesting to think about, especially since Mandela's grandson is named Gaddafi, showing how much support Gaddafi once had in South Africa and other African countries. Gaddafi ruled Libya for 42 years, starting as a hero, then becoming an outcast, then a hero, and then an outcast again. Since the unfortunate death of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, numerous theories have circulated regarding the circumstances surrounding his demise. Some suggest it was orchestrated by the United States to safeguard their interests, while others argue it was a straightforward coup. Well, if you're part of the group of Africans that wish for a better explanation, then this video is for you. Although hailed as a champion of Pan-Africanism and unity, Gaddafi faced allegations of backing notorious rebel groups in places like Liberia and Sierra Leone. Despite Western powers like France, Italy, Britain, and the United States expressing disdain toward him, Gaddafi also drew animosity from within African governments. This internal discord may help explain the African Union's restrained reaction during the 2011 Western military intervention in Libya. The continent's response, or rather its absence, to Gaddafi's downfall suggests a deep-seated sense of trauma resonating within Africa. In this video, we'll examine the underlying reasons behind Africa's silence when Gaddafi was toppled from power. President Yoweri Museveni's re-election to a sixth term in Uganda was expected, given his track record of 5 consecutive victories. However, his acceptance speech following the victory drew international notice, particularly his views about Africa's response to NATO's military intervention in Libya in 2011. President Museveni expressed remorse for the continent's quiet position during the intervention, underlining the inadequate diplomatic efforts of African governments. He pushed for a more proactive strategy, mentioning the prospect of military action to save Libya from devolving into the protracted civil conflict that followed Muammar Gaddafi's ouster. Despite acknowledging Africa's failure to intervene forcefully after Gaddafi's fall, President Museveni said military participation was unrealistic. Nonetheless, his views raised important issues about Africa's limited involvement in the Libyan conflict, which has been mostly viewed through the glasses of European, Persian Gulf, Russian, and Turkish interests, with the African perspective overlooked. The Libyan crisis began in February 2011 with widespread protests against Gaddafi's administration, which escalated into an armed struggle between his forces and rebel factions. NATO's intervention in March 2011 was meant to liberate Libya, but it resulted in Gaddafi's demise and left the country in turmoil. Over the last decade, Libya has seen political and economic collapse, internal wars, humanitarian catastrophes, and an influx of refugees into Europe. Furthermore, the existence of the Islamic State in Libya has raised security worries in the United States, spurring efforts to limit the issue. Prior to 2011, Libya had gained economic independence, becoming self-sufficient in water, food, oil, and currency, and shifting from one of Africa's poorest to one of its wealthiest countries under Gaddafi's rule. We carried out some research on the living conditions in Libya, and guess what we found? Did you know that the following facts are true about Gaddafi's Libya? 1. Electricity is free for all Libyans. 2. Loans in Libya are free with 0% interest as banks are state-owned. 3. Homes are considered a human right in Libya. Gaddafi vowed that his parents would not get a house until everyone in Libya had a home. Gaddafi's father died while he, his wife, and his mother were still living in a tent. 4. All newly married people in Libya receive $50,000 from the government to buy their first home to help the new family. 5. Medical treatment and education are free in Libya. Before Colonel Muammar Gaddafi ruled the country, only 25% of Libyans were literate. Today, the figure is around 83%. 6. If Libyans wanted to take up farming as a career, the government funded people from equipment to seeds, all for free. 7. The government subsidized 50% of the price of a new car if a Libyan citizen wanted to buy their first car. 8. Petrol price in Libya is around 14 cents per litre. 9. Libya has no debt externally, and its reserves amount to $150 billion, now globally frozen. 10. The Libyan government would fund anyone who got a degree, and if they could not get employment, they would receive income, as if they were employed until they got a job. 11. The sale of Libyan oil is credited directly to the bank accounts of all Libyan citizens in proportion. 12. A family would get US $5,000 if they had a new baby to support the child's upbringing. 13. 40 loaves of bread in Libya costs around 15 cents. 14. 25% of Libyans have a university degree. Inspired by Egypt's pan-Arab leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, Gaddafi tried to overcome economic disparities caused by colonial rule with a special emphasis on oil. Libya, Africa's top oil producer, has garnered significant foreign interest due to its massive petroleum reserves and natural gas deposits. However, despite its vast oil endowment, the country received only a portion of the earnings because extraction was controlled by foreign petroleum companies. Gaddafi publicly challenged foreign oil CEOs, underlining that Libyans could bear temporary oil shortages to secure their proper share of profits, reaffirming his commitment to restoring national sovereignty. Gaddafi's uncompromising position helped Libya become the first developing nation to claim the majority of its oil production profits. This accomplishment created a pattern for other countries, resulting in the Arab petrol boom of the 1970s, when Libya's oil production matched that of the Gulf states. Despite its modest population of less than 3 million at the time, Libya quickly accumulated money from its oil reserves. By the early 2000s, Libya's residents enjoyed a variety of social advantages, including free education and healthcare, and housing was seen as a fundamental human right. The country also established a unique system of local democracy, which was supplemented by major infrastructure projects like the Great Man-Made River Project, which brought water from the desert to metropolitan areas and coastal districts. Gaddafi even considered replicating this strategy throughout Africa, exercised unconstrained authority, and pursued an anti-imperialist agenda around the world, supporting militant groups and resistance movements. This approach strained relations with several African states, alienating previous friends and eroding Gaddafi's once widespread appeal across the continent. Despite Gaddafi's claims to popularity in Africa, his actions sparked distrust among African leaders. His military involvement in Chad in 1980 isolated Libya inside the Organization of African Unity, prompting many states to boycott the 1982 OAU conference in Tripoli. Furthermore, Gaddafi's support for ruthless governments like Idi Amin's in Uganda, as well as his calls for jihad in Congo against Mobutu Sese Seko's dictatorship, harmed his standing with African nations. In the 1990s, Gaddafi provided military training to deadly rebel organizations in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and he sponsored 2 rebel groups in Mali in 2000. During the same period, Tripoli and Zawiya had severe xenophobic attacks against black African migrant laborers, resulting in numerous casualties and undermining Gaddafi's pan-African reputation. Furthermore, following religious tensions in Nigeria, Gaddafi campaigned for the country's disintegration, suggesting separate Muslim and Christian states, effectively separating Africa's most populous state. Despite Gaddafi's goals for a united Africa, which included a continental army and currency, most African leaders opposed his proposals. He even called himself the King of Kings, but his ambitions frequently collided with political realities. His attempts to integrate Africa failed, mirroring his prior challenges in shifting from a pan-Arab to an Islamist agenda. Muammar Gaddafi emerges not merely as a figure of controversy, but as a beacon of hope for African unity and self-determination. Despite criticisms and allegations, Gaddafi's vision for Africa extended far beyond borders, rooted in the belief that the continent should chart its own course free from the interference of external powers. Gaddafi's utilization of oil revenue to extend his influence within the African Union was not merely a display of financial prowess, but a strategic move to bolster Africa's standing on the global stage. While some states accepted his financial assistance without fully embracing his ideology, the fact remains that Gaddafi's efforts aimed to uplift the continent collectively. However, the path to unity was not without its obstacles. Gaddafi's staunch stance against Western powers, particularly his vocal opposition to neo-colonialism and imperialism, inevitably led to strained relationships and eventual rejection by some African leaders who were entangled in Western alliances. Yet, amidst this discord, Gaddafi's unwavering commitment to African unity persisted. The aftermath of Gaddafi's removal from office unveiled a complex web of geopolitical maneuvering, with African nations grappling with their response to the Libyan crisis. The muted reactions from African governments as the conflict unfolded over a decade were not merely a sign of indifference, but a reflection of the continent's fractured state and the limitations of its collective voice on the global stage. The exclusion of the African Union from pivotal discussions aimed at resolving the Libyan crisis raised questions about the West's commitment to African solutions for African problems. Had the African Union been given a more prominent role, it could have potentially averted the escalation of violence and the proliferation of arms and extremist ideologies across the Sahel region. Reflecting on these events invites us to contemplate the potential outcomes if African nations had taken a more assertive stance in shaping the trajectory of the Libyan crisis. Would the continent have fared better under its own guidance? Could a united African front have steered Libya towards a more stable and prosperous future? As we navigate through these inquiries, we invite your insights and perspectives in the comments section below. Our commitment to fostering a deeper understanding of Africa remains unwavering, and we encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking discussions on the continent's past, present, and future. Thanks for watching.